behalf of the President of the United States Air Force and Recreation, please accept this flag as a symbol of our appreciation for your loved ones' honorable and faithful service.
The Jewish people respond to death with 3 words of blessing. In English, the words mean, "Praised is the judge of truth." So let us begin our service with the wisdom of our tradition. Please repeat these words of blessing after me. Baruch, Dayan, Ha'emet. Praised is the judge of truth. Adonai natan v'Adonai lakach. Yehi Shem Adonai mevorach. Adonai has given and Adonai has taken. Praised be the name of Adonai. We'll begin with the Psalm of David, Psalm 23, which I will chant first in Hebrew and then we will read together. Mizmor leDavid, Adonai roi lo echsar, bino dashayar bitzeini, al mei manuchot, yenaleini. Nafshi yeshovev, yancheni v'maglei tzedek, yancheni v'maglei tzedek, leman shemo. Gam ki ahilech begetz al mavet, lo ira ra ki ata imadi. Shiftecha umishantecha hema yenachamuni. Ta'aroch lefanai, shulchan neged zorerai. Dishanta v'shemen roshi, kosi revaya. Ach tov v'chesed yirdefuni, kol yemei chayai, kol yemei chayai. V'shavti bevet Adonai leorech yamim. Adonai roi lo echsar, Adonai roi lo echsar. A Psalm of David. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside still waters. He restoreth my soul. He guideth me in straight paths for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil. For thou art with me, thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of mine enemies. Thou hast anointed my head with oil, my cup runneth over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord forever. From the book of Ecclesiastes. A season is set for everything, a time for every experience under heaven, a time for planting and a time for reaping, a time for keeping and a time for discarding, a time for loving and a time for hating, a time for embracing and a time for refraining, a time for slaying and a time for healing, a time for laughing and a time for weeping, a time for dancing and a time for wailing, a time for birthing and a time for dying, a time for speaking and a time for silence, a time for seeking and a time for losing. And from the book of Proverbs, we are remembering today a very special woman. And so I'll read from the book of Proverbs, number 31. Eshet chayil mi'imsa, v'rachok mipninim michra. What a precious find is an Eshet chayil, a woman of valor. Her worth is far beyond rubies. All will put their confidence in her. She lacks no good thing. She is good to all she loves, all the days of her life. She opens her hand to the needy and extends her hand to the poor. She is clothed with strength and splendor. She looks to the future cheerfully. She opens her mouth with wisdom. Her tongue is guided by kindness. She oversees the activities of all of those she loves and never eats the bread of idleness. Her children come forward and they bless her. Her husband praises her and says, "Many women have done superbly, but you surpass them all." Charm is deceitful and beauty vain, but a God-revering woman is much to be praised. Extol her for the fruit of her hand. Wherever people gather, her deed speaks her praise. We're here today to celebrate the life and to remember Shirley Levy, best known as Sherry. And we have some family here to say some words and share some memories. I'd like to first welcome up her daughter, Jane.
Smart, fiercely independent, creative, and worldly is how I would describe my mom. Every day, right up until the very end, she followed the news, sharply aware of all the issues this country and the world are facing. Having been a senior buyer at Macy's in the better dress department, my mom had an amazing fashion sense. I will always remember our many trips to Loehmann's in search of outfits for me to wear to family events. Upon walking into Loehmann's and looking around for maybe 15 minutes, I would frustratingly say, "I can't find anything." Meanwhile, my mom would carefully go through each rack, picking out a few outfits for me to try on. I was always amazed at how flattering these outfits looked on my then size 6 body. She had a keen sense for finding beautiful clothing styles and fabrics. A few of these outfits still hang in my closet, and although I will never be a size 6 again, I just can't part with them. My mother was also an avid reader. A few months ago, I visited the Waterford Library in search of a new book for her to read. She told me to make sure I looked in the back of the book for her name. This meant she had read it. I stood in the library room for a long time, going through each of the books, and her name was on almost all of them. Finally, I found one book that didn't have her name in the back, and I brought it to her. Mom, I will always cherish the life lessons and memories that you have given me. You will be in my thoughts daily, and I love you forever. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jane, for that perfect recollection and summation of your mom. Beautiful, beautiful delivery. Thank you. I'd like to next welcome up her son, Richard.
Oops. My mom lived exactly 101 years and 51 weeks. She was 1 week short of her 102nd birthday, which would have been this Thursday. Over the last few years, a lot of people have asked me what was the secret to her long life. I used to answer that I didn't know. But that wasn't true. I did know, because she told me. But she made me swear to keep it a secret until she was gone. Mom, now that you're gone, I can finally share your secret. It was her secret to long life, but more importantly, her secret to happiness. First, she told me to never live in the past. Don't get hung up on woulda, coulda, shoulda, and don't dwell on past grievances or successes. Live in the present and always look to the future. Many of you know that my mom served in the military during World War II, and about 10 years ago, she wrote her memoirs, which are right down in front of me. For those of you who have read them, you know that she had an amazing memory. She could remember people, dates, facts, figures with amazing clarity, that it seemed like they happened only yesterday. But in fact, when she wrote them, they had happened more than 60 years ago, and she was over 80 years old, probably over 90 years old when she wrote her memoirs. But here's something that might surprise you. When I read the memoirs, most of those stories, they were news to me. I mean, we kids, we knew she was in the service, but she never really talked much about it. In fact, she barely ever talked about her past at all. And to this day, much of her life before the time she married my father is a mystery to me. For her, at least, dwelling in the past, regardless of whether her memories were happy, sad, or indifferent, was not the recipe for happiness or long life. She always lived in the present, and she always looked to the future. Here's the next part of her secret. My mom did not give a damn what anyone thought of her. She was fiercely independent. She had tremendous self-assuredness. And she always marched to her own drummer. Did Jewish girls from Brooklyn join the service in the 1940s? In the 1970s, did women in their 50s go back to school to start an entirely new career? The answer from my mom was, who cares? It's what she wanted to do, it was her dream, and it's what she did. What other people may have thought was of zero interest to her. She was a proud Democrat, a proud liberal, a proud feminist, and if you didn't like it, she didn't care. She was going to tell you her opinion, whether you agreed with it or not. She never played to the crowd, and she never tried to please anyone, especially her kids. She knew who she was smart, she was confident, and she was completely self-reliant. Even in her last years, when her mobility became quite limited, she still wanted to do everything for herself. I can still hear her yelling at me, Richard, I can do it myself. Finally, my mom believed in keeping her mind razor sharp. Undoubtedly, she was blessed with a memory that seemed to never forget anything. About a year ago, I had one of those moments where it finally hit me what a truly remarkable woman she was and what a truly remarkable memory she had. By this time, she was taking about 20 different pills a day, and she had to put them all in a pill box, which was about the size of a shoebox. And while she was carefully putting each pill in the pill box, she spilled the box on the floor. and the pills became all jumbled all over the place, and I lamented to her that we would never be able to figure out which pill was which. And she told me, no, I know what each pill is. I said, Ma, you take 20 different pills. How could you possibly know what each pill was? She said, because each pill has letters and numbers, and I've memorized each and every one. And I said, Ma, that's not possible. And she said, and you can all hear her saying this, oh yeah, test me. So I tested her. She scored 100%. But in addition to having what seemed like a photographic memory, Mom also never stopped learning and keeping up with modern technology. She loved Scrabble. She solved the New York Times Sunday crossword puzzle every Sunday. She read voraciously. She liked to travel. And even at 100 years old, she could be found sitting in front of her laptop, reading the news, checking the stock market, looking at Facebook, or playing her favorite Words with Friends. And just 3 months ago, my son Andrew taught her how to play one of the New York Times new games, Connections, and the next day, she beat us all at it. No grass ever grew under her feet. I will admit that for most of my life, I didn't recognize how truly remarkable my mother was. After all, she was my mom, and being a mom often involves being the voice of reason, or in her case, telling me in no uncertain terms the mistakes I was making. When I told my parents I wanted to take a year off from college to travel the world, my dad engaged me in a debate and a dialogue, and we discussed the pros and cons and how it could affect my future. My mom was more direct. She said it was the stupidest idea she'd ever heard. Changed my major to anthropology? Another dumb idea. She didn't waste time thinking about things. She knew what was, in her mind at least, right and wrong, and she went right to it. She didn't dither. And this is the last point. Mom was eminently practical. She was not one for whimsy or flights of fancy. Everything she did had a purpose or was in furtherance of a goal she wanted to achieve. And she instilled a lot of that practicality into me, that sense of purpose. She also instilled in me a love of crossword puzzles and games. And through her example, she taught me how to live in the present, not dwell in the past. She taught me these things slowly over time, over the course of a lifetime, without me even noticing that I was learning these things. And that's what a truly great parent does, right? A truly great parent teaches you things without you even knowing that she's teaching you, and that's what she was. She was an amazing woman, amazing person, amazing mother. For that, I will be forever indebted to her, and she's somebody for whom I'll be forever grateful. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard, for summing up your mom in such a special way. I'd like to now welcome up Harvey, her baby brother.
Well, first of all that's been said before hasn't surprised me a bit. My big sister Sherry, I'm really going to miss her. There was a great difference in our age, as the family knows. In fact, when I was little, she was almost like a second mother to me. She took me to movies, concerts, baseball games, and even played ball with me. There are photos of this. The one activity I balked at was ballet, and she never let me forget it. Because later in life, she had some tickets for Nutcracker Suite, and I said, "Oh, I'm sorry you didn't get some for me." And she said, "You don't like ballet." One time when I was a teenager, she invited me up to her apartment, her new apartment, up on 64th Street in Manhattan, for dinner. She wanted me to see the apartment. The one thing I didn't know was that there was a price to pay. When I got there, I was to help her put up decorator panels on the wall. And that was fun. In more recent years, when I've spent time down here in Florida during the winter, we did have a lot of good time together. We went to dinner usually several times a week at the place where she lived. Sherry told me more than once that she couldn't understand how all the, I guess, dangerous things that I did in my life, she couldn't reconcile it. She'd say it to me more than once, because she said, "You were such a timid little kid." And that was true. At the same time, I was always in awe of the things that Sherry accomplished in her life. She was and always will be my hero, and I will miss her very much.
Thank you so much, Harvey. I'd like to welcome up Arlene for just a couple of words from her heart.
Well, 57 years ago, I married Harvey, who just spoke, and I met Harvey's family. And there was something about Sherry that hit me right away. I don't know if it was her independence or what, but we sort of clicked. And I always felt I could look up to her and speak to her on, it wasn't like her level or my level. We found a common ground. I too love reading. I too love the opera and all the, the arts, and enjoyed talking with her about it. And she always listened, which was wonderful. And she always was open to questions, and it just brought us closer together. And all these things are true. Some things are new that I've just heard, some things are not. But the thing that I remember most, because Sherry was not very emotional, I would say, maybe on the inside, but she didn't always show it. And every time I saw her, right from the time, years after Harvey and I were married, and we'd visit, and I always say to her, "Sherry, I love you," because I really did love her very, very much. And I admired her, respected her, and I appreciated her. And she would always say, not "I love you." She would always look at me in the eye and says, "I know that." And so that's her way of saying that she loved me too, I guess. But I will miss her terribly because she added so much to my life, and also because of all the things Harvey just spoke about, because I've always loved the arts and music and reading, and she introduced Harvey to it. So I guess what she did for Harvey was really good for me too, because we do those things together now. So thank you. I will miss you, Sherry.
Thank you, Arlene. Beautiful. Shirley Case Levy, best known as Sherry, was born in Brooklyn, New York on March 21st, 1922. Her father, Abe, was an accountant who had a partnership in Manhattan in the Fur District, and her mother, Irene, was a homemaker. While many were led to believe that Sherry was the second child, Sherry was in fact the eldest of 4 children. Her brother Lawrence, otherwise known as Larry, of blessed memory, who passed away much too young, was followed by her dear sister Sonia, of blessed memory, and lastly Harvey. She was closest with Harvey, and because she was nearly 15 years older, 19 years older, Sherry made quite the impression on him. Growing up, Sherry was always surrounded by good friends. It was the 1930s, and she witnessed the ripples of hardship the Great Depression caused, and although she really didn't speak much about her childhood, she was always eager to share stories about summer camp and her friends, and she remembered each and every one of their names 90 years later. Sherry deeply cherished her lifelong friendships, many of which were founded upon shared political views, which was liberal through and through. Following high school in Brooklyn, Shirley enrolled in Hunter College, but desperate to spread her wings, at age 20, on a whim, she applied to work at an aircraft communicator, as an aircraft communicator for the Civil Aeronautics Administration, and was assigned to the communications station at the airport in Utica, New York, where she learned and used Morse code, among other unusual and unique skills. The commute was very long, and winters were cold and hard, and it was a time when women were not treated fairly nor given the respect they deserved. Thus, upon turning 21, and just months after the U.S. entered into World War II, Shirley, on a whim, walked into an Army recruiting office in Manhattan and enlisted. Because of the skills she learned while working as an aircraft communicator, she was quickly assigned to work as a private in the Women's Army Auxiliary Corps, which later became the Women's Army Corps, or WACS. She was stationed at various bases throughout the country, and unfortunately the Yukon Territory of Canada, rather than a romantic city like Paris, as she had hoped. Following her discharge, which was not immediately after the war ended, potentially around 1946, Shirley returned to finish her degree at Hunter College, majoring in English. Shirley was not only artistic, but she had a keen eye for fashion, and early on her original intent was to become a fashion designer. She was told, however, that in order to break into the fashion industry, she needed experience and background in retail. Thus, she started working in various department stores in New York and Washington, D.C., eventually becoming a buyer at Macy's in Manhattan, as Jane told us all about. If you were blessed to know Shirley, you know that she always paved her own paths and went her own way. She was strong, extremely intelligent, and good with words, and she looked much younger than she actually was. In fact, like her mother, she lied about her age for quite some time. Athletic and outdoorsy she was not, but she loved to paint and to read, enjoyed wine and chocolate, show tunes, classical music, and opera. She asked many questions and was a great listener and had all the answers. She was a woman of the world, always seeking opportunity and advancement, a sophisticate who found great satisfaction and delight in a good book and expected that everyone else should too. In all of her years, never a racist comment, never critiques based on ethnicity, sexuality. She was very open-minded and ahead of her time. While still an independent young single woman, she traveled with her girlfriends. She made many trips to Tanglewood, went skiing up in Canada. She had a good time. On one adventure, she and her colleague Bob Greenberg went up to a dude ranch in the New England region, and it was there that she met Alex. He had come to the dude ranch with someone else, but he quickly unattached himself from her, and Shirley and Alex began dating. At the time, Alex was working and living with his divorced mother in Connecticut, and Shirley was in D.C., so Shirley traveled north, Alex traveled south, and they would meet in New York City. Shirley was 2 days shy of 39 when she married Alex at the Plaza Hotel. It was a small wedding in a large suite on March 19th in 1961. The couple moved to Hartford, Connecticut. Jane was born soon after, Together, they lived there for a year or two, then bought their first house in Bloomfield, and Richard was born 4 years later. Alex and Sherry were both extremely intellectual and very independent, and yet always supportive of one another. While their personalities were vastly different, it seemed as though that was precisely why they worked. Each did their own thing, satisfied their own interests, and when they overlapped, they came together beautifully. Alex was very easygoing, much more conservative and reserved than Sherry was. Sherry always wanted to do more, see more, travel more, and though there was often tension, they worked. Sherry stayed home with Jane and Richard throughout their childhood, and she was a great mom. She was always engaged in what they were doing and consistently supported and encouraged them. Because of her strong personality, she had very firm opinions and made sure to instruct Jane and Richard on what they should and should not be doing. She intended for Jane to go to art school and Richard to attend law school, and that's what they did, even if it wasn't necessarily the right fit for them. The story goes that when Richard was younger and brought girls home, they always loved his dad, Alex, and always were terrified of Sherry. Sherry was not a religious woman, probably because she was such a feminist, and the way women were treated at the time was not very respectful. And Alex was a scientist who didn't really believe in religion. Most Jewish holidays, therefore, were spent with Sonia and her family. Sherry and Alex did not belong to a temple until Richard wanted to become a bar mitzvah. So they joined a Reform synagogue, possibly the most Reform synagogue in the neighborhood. Richard had his bar mitzvah and even attended through his confirmation. Sherry was not a cook, but she made the world's best meatballs. Most else was just sustenance. In her 50s, Sherry decided she wanted to go back to school to be an interior designer, and that's what she did. She received a master's in interior design from the University of Connecticut and worked in interior design, especially with fabrics, for many years at, I'm gonna not say this correctly, Botaro Skolnick in Springfield, Massachusetts. Even after she and Alex retired to Florida in the early 90s, she would decorate the houses and offices of her friends and family. It was something that brought her great joy. Sherry was a fantastic grandmother. She loved her grandchildren, Madeline and Andrew. And she was very interested in what they wanted to do always, very active in joining them. She came to the Berkshires to visit, went to the beach and the pool up in the Berkshires. She made a very strong effort to spend time with all of them. Andrew always told stories. Andrew always loved the stories that Sherry told, and they were often stories that no one else had really heard about her life, her younger life. She also truly loved her granddaughter Maya. She and Alex lived for their grandchildren later on, as well as for the life that they had created and the life that they were proud to live together. When Alex passed, she was deeply saddened and truly never moved on. Alex had this white recliner chair at the Waterford, and when he died, Sherry would sit in this chair all the time. At 4 a.m. when she awoke, she couldn't get back to sleep, and she would crawl into the chair and feel connected to Alex always. I asked the family what blessings and legacies Sherry would leave to them. And some of the messages that I received were to be strong, to always be independent, to not look back, as Richard shared, to always look to the future and the opportunities that lay ahead. She always, always marched to the beat of her own drum, and she wanted her children and her grandchildren to do the same, to be free and confident to do the same. Laura, Sherry's niece, texted most recently to Richard, "Your mom taught me how to be an independent woman and how to live my best life." A long life is not necessarily a full life, and a full life is not necessarily a long life. But Sherry was among the fortunate of this world who found blessing in a full life that was a long life as well. We say in our tradition, "Who are the wealthy? They who are satisfied with their portion." Sherry will be deeply missed, and today we offer comfort to Harvey, her baby brother, and Arlene, to Jane and her daughter Maya, to Richard, his wife Bonnie, and their daughter Madeline and son Andrew, to all of her friends, to David, Sonia's husband, and to all cousins and relatives. And we remember her beloved husband Alex and her brother Larry, her sister Sonia, all of blessed memory. When I come to the end, do not lament that the sun has set for me. Say a prayer and be content, while I cry for a soul set free. Miss me a little, but not too long, and not with your head bowed low. Remember the love that we once shared. Remember me, but let me go. This is a journey we all must take, and each of us goes alone. It's all part of the Master's plan. It's a small step on the road to home. When you are lonely and shed a tear, go to the friends we know. I am okay. Have no fear. Remember me, but let me go. May Sherry's name always be for a blessing, and may her life continue to inspire us to live life to its fullest, to stand up for what we believe in, to be strong, to never look back, to see this world filled with opportunities, to make this world a better place for all. Aleha HaShalom. May Sherry rest in peace, and let us all say, Amen. A memorial prayer. Please rise. El male rachamim, shochen bamromim, המצא מנוחה נכונה, תחת כנפי השכינה. במעלות קדושים וטהורים כזוהר, הרקיע מזהירים את נשמת שינה דבורה בת אברהם ועאידה ליבה, שהלכה לעולמו, וגן עדן תהא מנוחתה. אנא בעל הרחמים, הסתיריה בסתר כנפיך לעולמים, וצרור בצרור החיים את נשמתה, אדוני הוא נחלתה, ותנוח בשלום על משכבה, ונאמר Exalted, compassionate God, grant infinite rest in your sheltering presence among the holy and pure to the soul of Shirley Levy, who has gone to her eternal home. Merciful One, we ask that our loved one find perfect peace in your eternal embrace. May Sherry's soul be bound up in the bond of life. May she rest in peace. And let us say, Amen.
Ladies and gentlemen, this does conclude the chapel portion of the service. We are now going to head out to the mausoleum. You have the option to get on a golf cart if you're unable to walk there. We're going to take the casket out first. I'm going to ask the immediate family to follow directly behind the casket, and if everybody else could follow behind them.